The Agoge was Sparta's strict education system. The strenuous regimen took in the young boys, and then reshaped them until nothing was left but the strength, intelligence, and resolve of a perfect Spartan citizen. I will find you once your visit has ended, and we will talk further. Until then, visitor.
Sparta was a Greek city located in the Peloponnese. It differed from other cities of the time in that it had no walls. Sparta originated as 4 neighboring villages: Patane, Limnes, Mezoa, and Cynosura, all of which shared the same political, military, and religious life. After 2 wars with the Messenians, the city's territory expanded even further. By the 5th century BCE, they allegedly controlled almost half of the Peloponnese. The Agoge was the military training and education program undergone by Sparta's male youth. Grooming men for war was one of the city's main priorities. Boys began their training at the young age of 7 and completed it when they were 30. It has been said that Spartan infants were inspected for weakness shortly after birth. If they were deemed too sickly, they were thrown into chasms. However, this information remains unproven. The healthy boys were considered suitable for training. When they came of age, they were removed from their families and were placed into service of the state. Their education included subjects like reading, writing, and even music, but was mostly focused on tough military exercises meant to turn the boys into efficient soldiers. The Agoge was divided into 3 cycles: one for boys aged 7 to 12, one for adolescents aged 12 to 20, and one for men aged 20 to 30. Each cycle included different exercises for refining the body and mind. Sparta played a large role in defeating the Persians during the Greco-Persian Wars in the 5th century BCE. They held their king Leonidas's glorious death at the Battle of Thermopylae in particularly high esteem. Because Leonidas was killed in battle, Sparta believed he died a good death and showed incredible bravery, qualities to be held as a model for all Spartans. This idealized bravery was embedded in the city's collective memory and was the main quality people strove for in the Agoge. The first cycle of the Agoge focused on boys aged 7 to 12. Each of the boys had shaved heads and wore light clothing. They walked everywhere barefoot, swam the Eurotas River all year long, slept on reeds, and participated in cult rituals for Artemis or Thea. The boys were grouped into herds, or agoli, and were supervised by older adolescents. Once they reached the age of 12, they entered the second cycle of the Agoge, which aimed to integrate them into the society of citizen soldiers. The Agoge's second cycle included boys aged 12 to 20. When they reached the age of 20, the young men were dubbed Erinyes and could officially serve as hoplites in the Spartan army. Until the age of 30, Spartan men lived in communal mess halls called Sphacteria. From the age of 22 onward, they were permitted to start a family, but 30 was viewed as a more appropriate age to get married. Spartan men served in the military until they turned 60, when they were designated as elders, or gerontes. However, many were known to continue serving anyway, such as King Archimedes III, who fought in the army until he was killed in battle at the age of 62. All adult male Spartans participated in communal meals called syssitia. The attending Spartans contributed different kinds of food on a monthly basis, in addition to a small sum of money to pay for meat. Each man was entitled to 1 portion of a meal, with the exception of the kings, who received 2 portions. Syssitia attendance was mandatory for every Spartan fortunate enough to be part of the group. The meals had great political significance. According to Xenophon and Plutarch, the Syssitia was designed to foster a sense of equality between citizens. It also demonstrated the self-restraint and moderation of Spartan society. But in reality, the Syssitia only increased the differentiation between the rich and the poor. Those who could not afford to contribute to the communal food not only missed their meals, but also lost their right of citizenship.
Your tour has ended. As you have seen, the Agoge was not for the weak or faint of heart, but it did its job in producing skilled warriors and shrewd citizens. What else would you like to do? So you think you are ready for a test? Very well. Let us see how you fare. First, a simple question. The Agoge was made up of how many cycles? Correct. The Agoge was divided into 3 cycles. One for boys aged 7 to 12, one for adolescents aged 12 to 20, and one for men aged 20 to 30. Next question. How many meal portions were kings entitled to at Sicily? Yes, Spartan kings had the right to double portions. One final question. When were Spartans allowed to grow mustaches? No, though men were allowed to grow their hair long at this age. Try again. Yes! Once a Spartan man was over 30, he was allowed to adorn his face with a glorious display of manhood. Impressive, visitor. You should be proud. Safe travels, visitor.
Welcome to Pylos, traveler. This area, along with the nearby island of Sphacteria, were important battlegrounds during the Peloponnesian War. The Peloponnesian War was a great conflict between rivals Sparta and Athens. It lasted many years and cost a great number of lives on both sides. The battles of Pylos and Sphacteria occurred almost one after the other, and culminated with one of the most surprising outcomes in the entire war. But I will not spoil it for you. You'll have to experience it on your own. I'll wait for you at the end of the tour.
Since 431 BCE, the Peloponnesian War had been raging between Athens, Sparta, and their allies, with neither side gaining much ground. But in 425 BCE, an Athenian general named Demosthenes changed that. After a storm forced his fleet to stop in Pylos, Demosthenes realized a military presence in the area would give them an advantage against Sparta. Unfortunately, the fleet's strategists did not believe him, and left Demosthenes in Pylos with 5 triremes and 1,000 men. The Spartans, meanwhile, were too busy celebrating a religious festival to notice the enemy on their doorstep. Once Sparta discovered the Athenian presence on Pylos, the Spartan king Agis mustered his troops and fleet. Sparta then descended on Demosthenes' outpost, attacking from both the sea and the mainland. The Athenian general had to mount a hasty defense. He pulled his boats back to the foot of the ramparts and fixed them in place with stakes, providing extra cover. Then, going against all the established rules of battle, he descended with his hoplites to fight on the rocky shore, where he believed the Spartans would disembark. His gamble paid off, and the Spartans did indeed attempt to land at this location, though Demosthenes' forces made them hesitate. One of the Spartan leaders, Phidias, decided to make the first move by ramming the rocks with his boat, exclaiming, "It's only a few planks." He paid for his actions when his shield slipped into the sea after descending from his boat, leaving him open to many blows. The battle raged on into the night and continued to the next day, remaining locked in a stalemate. However, on the evening of the second day, Athenian reinforcements arrived. The sudden arrival of the Athenian fleet stacked the odds in Athens' favor. The fleet decided to hold off their attack until the next day, when they swarmed the Spartan ships. They successfully captured 5 enemy ships and damaged many others, cutting off access to the nearby island of Sphacteria. Then, to add insult to injury, the Athenians raised a stake hung with weapons they'd captured from the Spartans, including the shield of Brasidas. Meanwhile, the 420 Spartans on Sphacteria were trapped, and Sparta was completely helpless to rescue them. With 420 of their men trapped on Sphacteria, Sparta needed to reevaluate their position. The Spartans on the island were essentially the Athenians' hostages, and Sparta could not move to rescue or resupply them without putting their lives in danger. In an effort to save the trapped soldiers, the Spartan leadership negotiated an immediate truce with the Athenian strategists. Sparta agreed to hold back its fleet and halt their attacks on Pylos, and in return, the Athenians permitted them to send supplies to their men. In the meantime, Sparta sent ambassadors to Athens to try and negotiate a better deal. The hasty truce greatly humiliated Sparta, as they were forced to recognize just how helpless their infantry was in the face of an Athenian fleet. To bargain for the safety of their men, Sparta sent ambassadors to Athens to propose a cessation of hostilities. The ambassadors tried to emphasize that their situation was not a result of strategic incompetence or lack of strength, but rather plain bad luck. According to them, the Spartans on Sphacteria did not deserve to suffer further, because they were trapped through no fault of their own. These statements provoked the ire of Cleon, a popular Athenian politician known for his populist speeches. Cleon insisted that the terms of negotiations be discussed openly before the assembly and the Athenian people, instead of in private. The Spartan ambassadors were not as comfortable with public speaking as the Athenians, so they decided to leave. Following the failed attempts of the Spartan ambassadors, hostilities resumed. Back in Athens, Cleon took matters into his own hands. After being elected general, or strategos, he left to join the ongoing battle, accompanied by javelin-armed infantry and archers. With renewed strength and numbers, the Athenians landed on Sphacteria and engaged their enemy. The battle was hard fought, but they eventually managed to surround the remaining Spartans. It was then that Cleon invited the Spartans to surrender, as he hoped to return to Athens with prisoners. The Spartans were exhausted after spending 72 days on the island, so they accepted Cleon's offer and laid down their arms. A Spartan capitulation had previously been unheard of, and the news of their surrender echoed throughout Greece like thunder. The Spartans' capitulation completely changed the course of the Peloponnesian War. Athens used their new prisoners of war as leverage and threatened to execute them if Sparta ever returned to pillage their lands. This gave the Athenians the freedom to conduct their own raids, which were aided further by their eventual seizing of the island of Cythera. Sparta tried to negotiate for peace, but were unsuccessful. Cleon, meanwhile, was emboldened by his victory and continued to gain popularity with the Athenian people. Popularity that translated to power.
I hope you enjoyed learning about the battles of Pylos and Sphacteria. The battles were hard fought by both sides, but Athens' victory gave them an enormous boost in morale. It encouraged them to be more aggressive, and it was some time before Sparta recovered from the aftershocks of their historic surrender. Now, is there anything else you'd like to do? I'm happy to oblige. Let's begin. Where were Demosthenes and his fleet forced to land during a storm? Yes, Demosthenes landed at Pylos, where he was inspired to set up an outpost. On to the second question. Which famous Athenian argued with the peace-seeking Spartan ambassadors? Correct. Cleon demanded the terms of the peace be discussed in front of the Athenian assembly, which greatly dissuaded the ambassadors. One last question. Which Spartan general rammed Pylos with his ship? Correct. Brasidas ordered his ship to ram the rocks, and lost his shield in the process. You've passed the test. Well done, traveler. Then I will say farewell. Though I hope our paths will cross again someday.
Greetings, wanderer, and welcome to the Acropolis, the shining jewel of Athens. The Acropolis of Athens is a bastion of art and culture worthy of the gods themselves. Within this citadel, you will find many important sacred buildings, as well as some of the most magnificent art in all of Greece. You are in for a very enlightening visit. When you're done, come find me, and we can discuss the things you have seen. Farewell for now.
The Acropolis has gone through many changes in its long history. It began as a simple rock, was settled as early as the Neolithic period, and then became a fortress in the Mycenaean period. Stone buildings started appearing in the 7th century BCE. But the famous structures whose ruins remain visible today date mainly from a period of construction in the 5th century BCE. The location of the Acropolis is closely tied with Athens' foundation myth. Supposedly, it was the site where Athena and Poseidon competed for the city's patronage. This connection gave the Acropolis a sacred aura, and it was considered the religious heart of the city. The Temple of Athena Nike was built on the remains of old fortifications from the Mycenaean era. Worship at the temple can be traced back to the 6th century BCE, but the building itself was destroyed during the Greco-Persian Wars a century later. It was rebuilt during the Peloponnesian War. Given that the name Athena Nike roughly means Athena of victory, it was likely constructed in the hopes that Athens would win the war. Unusually, the temple depicts historical scenes of battles against the Persians instead of the more mythologically inclined art of other Greek buildings. The temple's priestess was chosen randomly among the Athenians and received a salary of 50 drachmae annually, along with skins and trophies from sacrificed animals. The Acropolis was built up over a long period, due in no small part to its partial destruction during the Greco-Persian Wars. It was in the 5th century BCE, though, that the Acropolis received its most significant improvements. This period was an extremely prosperous time for Athens, both financially and culturally. With a booming economy bolstered by trade and the Lavrion silver mines, Pericles, the leader of Athens, financed a huge project to rebuild the Citadel. He enlisted the help of renowned artists, like the sculptor Phidias, as well as the architects Iktinos and Callicrates. Together, they erected buildings like the Parthenon and the Propylaea Gateway. Pericles' goal was to make the Acropolis into a glorious monument to the gods and to mortal Athenians. Behind the Propylaea was the giant bronze statue of Athena Promachos, or Athena who fights on the front lines. That name was reflected in the spear and shield the statue held in its hands. It was erected in the mid-5th century BCE by the artist Phidias. According to an inscription, it took 9 years to make and cost almost 500,000 drachmae. At approximately 10 meters tall, the statue was apparently so large that Pausanias claimed its helmet and spear tip could be seen from the sea near Cape Sunion, 60 kilometers away. The ornamentation on the statue's shield was engraved by the metalsmith Mies. The Aerophoroi were young girls between the ages of 7 and 11 who were in charge of special rites. A list of 4 girls was drafted by the Assembly of Citizens, from which the High Magistrate, the Archon Basileus, chose 2 to serve as Aerophoroi for the year. The girls lived in a house on the Acropolis. They were in charge of carrying sacred objects and weaving the peplos of Athena. The peplos was a sacred robe offered to Athena during Panathenaea, a festival held in her honor. The Erechtheion was an atypical temple. It was dedicated not only to Athena Pylos, but also to Cecrops, the mythical founder of Athens, his son Erechtheos, and even Poseidon, the sea god who challenged Athena for possession of the city. The temple was divided into sections. The eastern part housed a statue dedicated to Athena, while the western section jointly belonged to Poseidon and Erechtheos. Meanwhile, King Cecrops' grave was believed to be under the caryatid porch. Under the temple was a crypt that was said to contain the sacred snakes of Athena. The snakes may have had a sweet tooth because the priestesses of Athena allegedly fed them honey cakes. The Parthenon is one of the most well-known buildings in the world and an enduring symbol of ancient Greek civilization. While it is located on the Acropolis, the building is not a traditional temple. It was built by the sculptor Phidias and the architects Callicrates and Iktinos as a great monument to the glory of the city of Athens. That glory is evident in its many carvings. One of the most carved monuments in Greek architecture, the Parthenon's decorations depict several mythological scenes. These include the birth of Athena, her fight against Poseidon for the patronage of Athens, the gods' battle with the giants, and the procession of the great Panathenaea. The Parthenon's inner chamber, or cella, contained a massive statue of Athena that was considered to be one of the sculptor Phidias's greatest masterpieces. The statue was chryselephantine, a combination of gold and ivory. To justify the steep cost of its construction, Pericles told Athenians that the statue was a gold reserve, which could be disassembled in times of economic distress. The cella also allegedly contained a pool, whose main purpose was to control the room's humidity, which helped preserve the statue's ivory. Athens' treasury was located in the Parthenon, where it was believed to be protected by Athena herself. The treasury contained objects of great value, acquired from different conquests, as well as a mass of minted silver coins and various offerings to Athena. Pericles also decided to move the entirety of the Delian League's treasure to the Parthenon in 454 BCE. This was a great testament to Athens' power over the rest of Greece. The riches were divided into two parts, the Demosia, which belonged to the city, and the Hiera Cremata, which was dedicated to the goddess and only used for religious purposes.
And what did you think of the Acropolis? It truly is quite something, isn't it? A sacred sanctuary and an architectural marvel, all in one. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. You're confident enough for a test? Very well. Let us see how much you know. Which two gods competed for Athens' patronage? Correct. It was Poseidon and Athena who fought for Athens' patronage. As for who won, the answer is in the city's name. On to the next question. Who sculpted the statue of Athena in the Parthenon? Correct. The renowned sculptor Phidias made the statue, which was considered one of his masterpieces. And now, the final question. Which king's tomb was believed to be under the caryatid porch? That is correct. Cecrops was the mythological first king of Athens, and his tomb was said to be under the Erechtheion. It seems you know much about this place. Well done, wanderer. As you wish. Hopefully we will see each other again soon.
Welcome, friend, to this especially sacred part of the Olympian sanctuary. The sanctuary of Olympia was dedicated to Zeus, king of the gods. It had close connections to the divine, as you will see very soon. I'll come find you when you're done, and we can talk about what you've learned.
This workshop was built for the renowned sculptor Phidias after his work on the Acropolis of Athens. In 435 BCE, Phidias came to Olympia to begin working on the great chryselephantine statue of Zeus. He died 5 years later, shortly after completing his masterpiece. This grand statue would become one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Phidias's workshop was located right next to the Temple of Zeus. Its structure has been well preserved, mostly owing to its conversion to a church in the 5th century CE. Archaeologists have also discovered lots of ancient materials in the surrounding area, such as casting molds and sculpting tools. The most famous artifact, however, is a cup bearing an inscription that aggressively states, "I belong to Phidias." On the 5th and final day of the Olympic Games, victors attended a ceremony where they were crowned with olive wreaths and showered in flowers. The crowns came from the sacred olive tree of Zeus, which was planted near the god's temple. A young boy trimmed the branches with a golden sickle, before giving them to the Hellanodikai to turn into wreaths. After the crowning ceremony, it was time for great feasting and celebration. Pelops was both a legendary Greek hero and the mythical founder of the Olympic Games. According to legend, Pelops fell in love with the beautiful Hippodamia. Her father, Oenomaus, the king of Pisa, disapproved of their union. Having once heard a prophecy that he would be killed by his son-in-law, Oenomaus was known to challenge his daughter's suitors to chariot races, killing them when he won. Still, Pelops was determined to win Hippodamia's heart. Before the race, he enlisted the help of Poseidon, who gave him a golden chariot with 4 winged horses. Pelops was able to win both the race and the hand of his beloved, while Oenomaus was dragged to death by his horses. The start of this famous race was depicted on the eastern pediment of the Temple of Zeus. The Heraion was a temple dedicated to Hera. It is one of the oldest temples in the sanctuary, dating back to approximately 590 BCE. The structure included columns painted with images of women who won the Heraia, an athletic competition made up of running events. Every 4 years, 16 women were chosen to make a veil dedicated to Hera. These women also organized the competition, though they did not compete in it. The Heraia was unique for its focus on female athletes, in contrast to the male-exclusive Olympic Games. Hera was the goddess of women, marriage, family, and childbirth. She ruled Mount Olympus as Queen of the Gods, along with her husband and brother Zeus. Many mythological stories paint her as being annoyed at Zeus's many lovers and illegitimate offspring. In Greek art, Hera is usually depicted as matronly and regal, often wearing a crown or sitting on a throne. She is also sometimes seen holding a pomegranate, a symbol of both fertility and death. Hera's cult was very popular across Greece, and Olympia even minted her image on its coinage. One of the highlights of the Olympic Games was a ceremony that took place on the 3rd day of the festival. It began with a procession of athletes, ambassadors, Hellenodikai, and animals. The group made their way around the Altis until they arrived at the Temple of Zeus. Then the animals were brought in front of the altar of Zeus and offered as a sacrifice. This sacrifice was known as a hecatomb, a word that originally described the sacrifice of 100 oxen. During the hecatomb, the bones and legs of the animals were burned and carried to the top of a mound of ashes from previous sacrifices. Meanwhile, the meat of the animals was saved for a large banquet held later in the evening. The Olympic Games were dedicated to Zeus, and all the ceremonies and events were hosted in his honor. It is no surprise that the largest temple in the sanctuary was the Temple of Zeus. While most temples were restricted to priests, the Temple of Zeus welcomed all who visited Olympia. This openness was most likely meant to show off the gold and ivory statue of Zeus that stood within the temple's walls. The building also featured art depicting both versions of the Olympic festival's founding myth. The eastern pediment showed a scene from the legendary race between Pelops and Oenomaus. The temple's metapiece, meanwhile, showed the 12 labors of Heracles, the other mythical founder of the Games. Zeus was the god of sky and thunder, and king of the Olympians. He ruled the world from his home on Mount Olympus. The child of Cronus the Titan, Zeus overthrew his father and cast the Titans out in a great battle known as the Titanomachy. He had children of his own with his wife Hera, including Ares, Hephaestus, Hebe, and Eileithyia. He also had many children without Hera, much to her consternation, but there are too many to list here. Zeus was believed to have control over the lives of mortals, as his many epithets attest to. For example, his title Horkios made him a keeper of oaths, while Xenios was the name conferred to him as a protector of hospitality. In Greek art, Zeus was usually depicted holding a thunderbolt and sitting on a throne, befitting his position as king. The Temple of Zeus was home to the chryselephantine statue of Zeus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The statue, made of gold, ivory, and wood, was sculpted by the renowned artist Phidias. At 13 meters tall, it was as impressive looking as it was difficult to maintain. Oil was used to protect the wood and ivory from cracking, and to prevent general decay. While the statue does not exist today, it was thankfully described by Pausanias in great detail, so its legacy lives on.
Hello again! I hope you enjoyed your visit and feel a little bit closer to the gods. Well, as close as a mortal can get. Is there anything else you'd like to do? Excellent! Let's see what you remember. Your first question is a simple one. Which goddess was Zeus's wife? Correct! Not only was Hera Zeus's wife, she was his sister as well. But let's move on to the next question. What kind of contest did Pelops win in his quest to marry Hippodamia? Yes, Pelops won a chariot race, thanks to Poseidon's help. And now, the final question. What was inscribed on the cup found near Phidias' workshop? Correct! Apparently, Phidias was very possessive of his things. Perhaps someone from the sanctuary kept stealing them. But I'm getting off track. Excellent work, friend! You honor the gods with your great wisdom. Farewell for now, my friend.
Greetings, Wanderer, and welcome to the Agora of Athens. I love this Agora. Where else could you find a common fish merchant and an extravagant jewelry seller within a few feet of each other? It's that kind of variety that makes city life so rich and exciting. The Agora is the beating heart of any Greek city. It is a place where all types of people may gather, from citizens and foreigners to magistrates and philosophers. All manner of business is conducted here, including political meetings, legal proceedings, and trade. When you finish exploring, come find me, and we can talk more. See you soon, Wanderer. Enjoy your visit. I will see you soon.
The Agora was the civic center of Athens, but it wasn't only frequented by politicians and city officials. The area housed a market where people could purchase food and other goods from merchants. It was also frequented by philosophers, who used the public space to establish schools and pass on their teachings to students. Religion had its place as well. Temples dedicated to Hephaestus and Apollo were located in the Agora, along with the altar of the 12 gods and the monument of the eponymous heroes. The painted stoa, or stoa poikile, derived its name from the panel paintings on its wall. The paintings were created in the 5th century BCE by famous artists like Polygnotus and depicted Greek military victories like the Battle of Marathon. The stoa served as a public meeting place for citizens, but it was especially popular with philosophers who used the space to pass on their teachings. In 301 BCE, the philosopher Zeno of Kition chose the Stoa Poikile as the location for his school of philosophy, the appropriately dubbed Stoicism. Trade in the Agora was supervised by magistrates. There were 5 agoranomoi, who kept order in the market, controlled the quality of goods, and collected market dues. This provided revenue to the city and helped pay the magistrates and those in charge of maintaining order. The market benefited everyone. Customers bought what they needed, merchants made their living, and city officials received the money they needed to keep the wheels of democracy turning. The original Temple of Apollo Patrous was built around 535 BCE by Pisistratos, but was destroyed by the Persians during their invasion a few decades later. It long remained in ruins, except for the altar, which was left standing as a reminder of the Persian sacrilege. Eventually, a new temple was built in the 4th century BCE. Inside was a statue made by Euphranor, the same artist who painted in the Stoa of Zeus. The temple held special significance in Athens, as it was connected to the origin of the city's people. The name Patrous, meaning fatherly, referenced the belief that Apollo was the father of Aeon, founder of the Ionian Greeks, from whom all Athenians are descended. The Temple of Hephaestus overlooks the Agora from the Colonus Agoreus hill. Today it is one of the best preserved temples in Greece, owing to its conversion to a church in the Middle Ages. But while this transformation preserved the structure, it also damaged the surrounding sculptures. The temple was dedicated not only to Hephaestus, the god of metallurgy, but also to Athena Ergane, goddess of arts and crafts. Nearly every part of the Hephaestion was lavishly decorated with depictions of famous mythological events, like the labors of Theseus. The Theseus scenes gave the temple the nickname Thesion, a name that lives on today as a city district in Athens. The Boulaterion was another building in the Agora that contributed to the democratic process. It housed the Athenian Council of Citizens, the Boulei. This council of 500 was composed of 50 members from each Greek tribe, all of whom served a one-year term. They were chosen by lot from among citizens over 30. Every month, one group of 50 was chosen to lead the Boulei's executive committee, the Prytaneis. The Prytaneis met every day of the month and called meetings of the full council in the Boulaterion, where they spent their time discussing bills. The Prytaneon was one of the most important buildings in the Agora, as it was the headquarters of the Prytaneis. The Prytaneis was the executive committee of the Boulei, who ran the city's daily operations. The Prytaneis dined in the Prytaneon, and 17 of them slept on site to ensure there were always officials available to deal with emergencies. The Prytaneon also housed the official weights and measures of the city. The Fire of Hestia, which provided sacred fire for all public sacrifices, was also located there. The Heliaia was the most important court in Athens, and was presided over by a group of judges called Heliasts. Judging was a regular part of an Athenian citizen's life, with trials happening almost every day. Heliasts were chosen randomly based on two factors. First, that they were on the official list of 6,000 potential Heliasts. Second, that they were present at court on the day of the trial. A stipend of 2 obols was established by Pericles to compensate for the loss of work while on Heliast duty, and also to encourage participation in the judiciary process. In the Agora, an Athenian could buy and sell many different products. The permanent retail market was divided into sections according to the category of merchandise. Merchants and craftsmen who worked in the market could be citizens, foreigners, or even freed slaves. They sold everything from food and clothes to jewelry and slaves. With so much variety, competition was fierce, and that competition helped regulate the market's prices.
Ανυπόφορον εστίν οράν.
The Heliaio wasn't the only court in Athens. This other court was located next to the South Stoa. Historians believe it to be a court based on the discovery of a nearby box containing 7 bronze ballots. These ballots were used by jurors to give their verdicts. The reason trials were so common in Athens might have been related to their democratic regime, which promoted the individual's right to demand reparations for injustice. However, not all legal matters were settled in this fashion. If a claim was small enough, it was settled individually by a magistrate. Public trials were reserved for more serious offenses, such as murder, theft, and political crimes. The mint was where the city made its coinage. It is believed that Athens' mint was in the city's Agora, as modern excavations have turned up small disc-shaped pieces of metal used to make coins. Much of the silver required for minting coinage came from the Lavrion silver mines. Athens was so dependent on the mines that when they lost them during the Peloponnesian War, the city was forced to melt down a gold statue of Athena to mint gold coins and avert a monetary crisis.
You have now experienced the Agora, following in the footsteps of countless Athenians before you. I hope the trip has impressed upon you how important this place was to trade, politics, and law. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Very well. Let's begin. Which philosopher's school took its name from the painted stoa? Socrates was one of the greatest minds in Greece, but there are no records of him teaching at the painted stoa. Try a different answer. Yes, Zenon taught at the stoa, and so he and his followers were dubbed Stoics. Time for another question. What other name has the Iphistion gone by? Correct! The name was inspired by the scenes showing the hero Theseus, which decorate the temple. Only one question left. When Athens lost the Lavrion silver mines during the Peloponnesian War, which statue did they melt down to mint new coins? Correct! The Athenians melted down a statue of Athena to mint gold coins. It's clear you are very familiar with the Agora of Athens. I'm impressed. Farewell, wanderer. May we see each other again soon. Greetings, wanderer, and welcome to the Port of Piraeus. Piraeus is one of the busiest, most important ports in the Greek world. Money flows through here like a river that runs all the way to Athens. Acting as a port for Athens, Piraeus welcomed merchants, goods, and travelers from all over the world. It was a central part of Athens' economy, but it was also fortified enough to protect the city's considerable fleet. When you finish exploring the port, find me, and we will talk further.
Piraeus, a peninsula southwest of Athens, became the city's main port after the politician Themistocles encouraged the development of its natural harbors. These developments led to the gradual abandonment of the older harbor of Phaleron. Piraeus's fortifications were further developed by Cimon and Pericles, along with the long walls, which ensured goods could still be moved during sieges. Piraeus was divided into three main sectors: the military port, the emporion, and the residential area. By the 5th century BCE, it had become not only Athens' naval headquarters, but also the mercantile center of the Mediterranean. Piraeus's development during the 5th century BCE attracted a large population. Many craftsmen, merchants, bankers, sailors, and ship owners moved to the port in great numbers. The population was a mix of Greek citizens, foreign visitors, and immigrants, known as metics. The variety of the port's inhabitants gave Piraeus a cosmopolitan atmosphere. Most of the residents were involved in trade, but others worked on shipbuilding or in larger-scale industries like shield factories. Piraeus's commercial focus offered many opportunities for those seeking to increase their wealth and status. One such rags-to-riches tale is that of Passion, a slave who eventually became a citizen and earned a fortune thanks to his bank and his shield factory. Piraeus was a demi, or district, of Attica. Because of its size, function, and varied population, it had a much more complicated administrative structure than other demes. Above all, Piraeus was closely monitored and controlled by the Athenian assembly due to its importance to the city. Within the port, there were two separate categories of trade: international trade, which took place in the emporion, and retail trade, which was managed by Kapoloi in Piraeus' Agora. The Emporion was a commercial port dedicated to trading goods from overseas. All international transactions were required to be made within its limits and needed to be exclusively wholesale. Elected magistrates managed all business and laws in the port. Meanwhile, port authorities known as epimeletes oversaw trade and took care of the regulation of prices. This was an especially crucial duty, as the amount of supplies and goods could fluctuate wildly based on factors like bad harvests or lost cargo. Common products sold in the Emporion included vegetables, fruits, fish, leather, timber, marble, metal, weapons, and ceramics. According to Hermippos, Athens was also wealthy enough to afford the finest goods from all over the world, including figs from Rhodes, almonds from Thasos, oil from Samos, and wine from Chios. Taxes were collected on all merchandise that came into the Emporion, which provided Athens with a major source of income. After arriving in the Emporion, merchants set up samples of their goods in a display area called the Deigma. This was where citizens and foreigners gathered to officially make their deals, and almost all merchandise that came into the Emporion was traded within the area. The Deigma was under constant supervision by magistrates, who negotiated price control with the importers. They would occasionally give special privileges to those who agreed to sell at lower prices. These privileges ranged from tax exemptions to specially reserved seating in the theater. Piraeus was a deme, and as such was supervised by a magistrate called the Demarchos. While most demarchoi were chosen locally within their deme, Piraeus was appointed directly by Athens, so the city could better monitor its commercial interests. In fact, matters regarding the Emporion, the military harbor, and the grain trade were regularly debated and decided by the Athenian assembly. Transactions within the Piraeus were supervised by metronomoi. These were magistrates responsible for keeping track of weights and measures. They made sure merchants' measurements were always accurate to prevent bad deals and scams. Even though Piraeus would eventually develop into a city in its own right, it always remained under the control of Athens. A commercial tax of 2%, or a pentecost, was placed on all cargo entering and leaving Piraeus. The tax was collected by a group of 5 people called Pentekostalogoi. According to Andocides, this position could be bought for the hefty sum of 30 talents, or 180,000 drachmae. However, most of these officials made a profit of up to 6 talents. making the job very lucrative. While merchants were responsible for setting the value of their goods, Pentekostologoi had the power to challenge the value, if they saw fit. Furthermore, merchants were required to register with these officials before they could transport, display, and sell their goods. Overall, this system provided Piraeus, and by extension Athens, with a tremendous amount of money. The sale of grain was overseen by special magistrates called Sitophilakes. Since some Greek cities had a grain deficiency and relied heavily on imports, these officials were extremely important. Their duties encompassed all aspects of grain commerce, including price control and profit margins, to ensure Athens remained well-fed. This is no surprise. Grain was so important to Athens that 2/3 of all stocks were required to be transported and sold at the city's Agora by law. According to Demosthenes, the significance of the Sitophilakes was such that if they failed in their duties, they faced the death penalty.
Ανάκρουσε πρίμναν.
The Emporion operated on a foundation of credit and loans. Overseas commerce was handled by two types of tradespeople. Emporoi transported cargo in borrowed ships, while naukleroi were ship owners who moved goods on their own vessels. Elsewhere in the Emporion were bankers and accountants who arranged loans and kept track of incoming and outgoing ships. Emporoi and naukleroi financed their maritime voyages with these loans, which often had a high interest rate due to the dangers of sea travel. Emporoi used the loans to pay for both the cargo and the right to a ship, while naukleroi only had to pay for their crew. Loans and interest were repaid upon a ship's return to port. However, in the event of a catastrophe such as a shipwreck, the merchant and ship owner were released from their obligations, and the losses were transferred to the lender.
You've returned. I hope you enjoyed your stroll through the port. Piraeus was important to Athens' commercial interests, but it eventually came into its own as a vibrant and bustling port. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. If you say so, let us see what you've learned, Wanderer. First, a simple question. Which Athenian politician originally encouraged the development of Piraeus' natural harbors? Pericles did contribute to the port's development, but he was building off someone else's ideas. Try again. Correct. Themistocles saw Piraeus' potential as a port and encouraged its development. On to the next question. What did the Sitophilakes supervise? Loans were handled by the port's bankers and accountants. Keep trying. It was Metronomi who were in charge of Piraeus' weights and measures. Try again. Yes, Sitophilakes had the extremely important responsibility of handling all matters related to grain commerce. Only one question left. What was the name of the slave who took advantage of Piraeus' opportunities to earn themselves citizenship? Correct! Passion managed to earn a fortune and achieve citizenship thanks to both his bank and a successful shield business. Your knowledge of Piraeus is impressive. Well done, Wanderer. As you wish. Thank you for visiting.